In a relationship, when is honesty not the best policy? How do you balance what you want versus what you need? And is there something you need to say to your spouse, but can't find the right way to say it? If so, then you're in the right place. This is the Lunch with Sandy podcast. With nearly 20 years of marriage under their belts, Terrence and Sandy Jackson discuss a range of topics, provide valuable insights on relationships, and talk about the conversations married couples need to have. So what does lunch have to do with all of this? Well, it's a metaphor for how these conversations originally started. Speaking of conversations, let's get one going. Here's your hosts, Terrence and Sandy.
Hello and welcome to the Lunch with Sandy podcast. I'm Terrence.
And I'm Sandy.
And as always, we are having the conversations that couples need to have. Sandy.
Yes.
What's happening?
I came to a realization this week.
Nicely did. And what was that realization? You know, the realization of the week is supposed to happen after we do the little whole, how you doing and settle into the episode. But go ahead.
Okay. So I realized, I do it internally quite often, right? I have that internal monologue, which I know not everybody actually has.
I think you just did one just now.
I might have, but no. So I often have internal monologues with myself, but in where I'm trying to focus on positive and we'll say give myself a little bit of a pep talk as needed. But I did it talking to somebody this week. So
you gave yourself a pep talk while you were talking to somebody this week?
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm trying to follow this.
Yeah. So work has been kind of chaotic as of late. And I was talking to someone about all the great things about my role. And I realized coming out of that conversation, I actually felt a lot better and better than I would normally feel, just internalizing and trying to give myself a pep talk about, why I enjoy my role and, why I should continue to still love it. But actually talking to somebody about it and expressing those things verbally actually made a big difference this week.
I'm going to tell you what I just heard and what I just learned, and hopefully you learned it too. What? Stop talking to yourself. Listen, you're going to get better results talking to other people.
Oh, no. I don't know.
I don't know what that says about you giving advice, but stop talking to yourself.
I talk to myself way too much.
Yeah. It's funny because I think
third person in this relationship.
That's funny because I think that plays right into today's topic, because I think that's I think talking to yourself can be a cultural thing.
I don't know. There's like a test out there. Can you do an internal monologue or not? And I believe we came to the realization that I do it and you do not.
Well, yeah. See, you do it and I do not, but that's not can I do it and you, because I can, I just don't.
Okay.
I just don't. I'd like to record you having that internal monologue with yourself because I can see it.
That's dangerous.
Yeah.
Like when Ayla asks me what I'm looking at, I'm like, nothing. Yeah. I go off into Sandy land.
Yep, and you'll be staring right at her.
I know. But I don't see her.
That's creepy.
You're
trying to scare my daughter.
I am what I am.
Well,
it is what it is.
Yes. So do you remember the first time that I met your family?
I don't know if I remember exactly the first time, but I remember at least the first few times.
Yeah. Yes. I realized something during those first meetings. We're different. We're different, right? And so it just culturally, there's so many differences from culture to culture, but I learned real fast that, you and your family did things different. and it was strange. It was something that
Takes
I
some
was
getting
not
used to.
Well, I mean, yeah. Listen, it took a lot to get used to. I mean, first off, you guys like to crowd in a bunch. There's always a bunch of you.
We're a big family.
Yeah.
And we grew up all together as a big family. It wouldn't be a family function without at least, 40 people being there.
Yeah, I realized that. I mean, culturally, you guys just move different, and I think each culture moves different. It definitely different from my cultural background. One of the biggest areas where I learned or I saw a difference was in the way that you guys communicate. Listen,
Do we communicate? I don't know.
Listen. Well,
To be sarcastic.
it's funny you say that, because the question becomes, is there communication in the talk that happens between all of you? I mean, I'm guessing there's some communication, but different cultures communicate differently, right? So from the perspective of,
We're definitely not quiet.
each culture is different, right? But it's funny when you see that communication piece, right? I learned very, very early on that different cultures communicate differently. You guys communicate very differently from the way that I was brought up. I remember,
I'm just
I remember saying, "Damn,
There's a lot of communication difference.
why do you guys always yell?
We're not yelling.
Right, we're not yelling. That's how we talk." I'm like,
Right. Well, the goal is that the loudest person gets heard, so you start learning how to one up
Well,
the last person to get your viewpoint in, because there's a lot of you, and you can't talk softly because nobody's going to hear you. So you have to keep raising the bar.
one of the big challenges that I had to get over, when experiencing your culture. And for those of you who don't know, Sandy's Portuguese, and in the true sense of the word, everything is loud. It was how loud you guys communicated. I mean, it was like there was a fight every 2 seconds. Everyone was yelling, and 1 minute everyone's yelling, and then the next minute everyone's smiling, and I'm like,
And laughing.
are they gonna fight? What's happening? Are they gonna hug? So that was different, and I remember for the first. I mean, it might be the first couple of months. Your parents had that little back room. I just be in that back room. Y'all be out there screaming and making all that noise, and I'd be in that back room watching that little TV, being like, "Man, this is different."
Yeah, well, but look at you now.
Yeah, listen, I got the language down packed. Again, I won't say it again. And you know what's funny? So it wasn't just how loud you guys talk. It was the way you talk too. So when I was growing up, there was a certain way that you can talk to people, particularly adults. And there was a certain way that you could not talk to adults. And what blew me away was y'all talked any kind of way that you wanted to in some cases.
Well, as an adult, it's probably a little different.
Yeah.
Because, we definitely could not talk to adults
Yeah.
as a child.
Yeah. And still,
In
so
any kind of
listen,
manner.
I'm gonna tell you something right now.
Because you just get backslapped real
Listen.
quick.
in a black household, I don't care how grown your ass is. You talk the wrong way to Ma Dukes, you might catch a 2-piece, not a 2-piece, one of those big silver spoons. You might get a frying pan or a slipper or something tossed at you. So even as an adult, you got to watch your tone, because there's that famous phrase, "I brought you in this world, I'll take you out."
Yeah. Well, there always has to be some kind of level of respect. However, I think it also kind of dependent on other things. Like for me, it wasn't a cultural thing. It was just a
Something else.
childhood thing,
Yeah.
I guess I'll call it, to where, if my mother did something to upset me, I would specifically do something to purposely upset her.
Yeah, well, listen,
But and not being, completely rude and disrespectful, but I knew how to poke her buttons, and hence I did it.
yeah, and that's the thing. Listen, something will fly at you. You push the wrong button. In a black household, you push the wrong button, something's gonna fly at
Right.
you. And the biggest thing, so there was the way you guys communicated. Mm-hmm. I won't talk about the food, but the food is completely different. I mean, you guys put some stuff on the plate. You know what I mean?
Put some stuff on the plate.
It was the squid, the rabbit, and the sardines.
Type of food.
Oh, the type of food. Yeah. I mean,
Right,
different cultures.
Yeah, because we always have way too much food.
Well, listen, I think culturally that's a difference too. You know what I mean? You guys feed an army of 10 like it's an army of 110. There's so much extra food that
Always a concern of running out of food.
and there's never enough people to actually eat it. But
Still to this day.
the biggest communication, the biggest communication piece and the challenge for me was actually the language. Because I don't know if you remember, but for a long time, a lot of individuals would not speak English.
Yeah. Well, we definitely have certain family members who are not comfortable speaking English and
Yep.
hence choose to use it sparingly, we'll say it. And when they're comfortable with you, they're more comfortable speaking the language which they are uncomfortable at.
Yeah, it's
So-
the funny part about
Like
that
a lot
was
of
this.
things that go into it.
The funny part about that was this. So when you come around a group and they don't speak any English, right? You can think one or two things. Oh well, if you're insecure, you can think, oh well, it's taught me. But the other part about it is the other way to approach it is, and this is the way I was. Well, I mean, they really can't speak that much English. Let me tell you what surprised me.
Okay.
Your parents' English is fine.
Well, unless you ask them.
Well, I mean, if you listen, it's fine. Let's fast forward. Let's fast forward when I was asked to go to a couple of doctor's appointments because they felt more comfortable, having me there to actually relay to the doctor what it is they were saying, and I didn't say nothing because when they get in there, their English miraculously works just fine.
Yes. It's, again, a comfort level. Making sure that they don't miss anything being communicated to them. So even though, like, while you're not there in the appointment, they know that you're coming home to me and telling me what the doctor said.
But I
And
have
that
to be
I'm
there in the
having-
appointment
Yeah.
to do that.
Right. And then I'm having the conversation with them about it later. So it's almost like just having a different perspective.
I remember in particular, it was an appointment that I went with your father, and the doctor asked him every question, and he answered every question. And additionally, they had an interpreter there, and then the doctor says, "Why is the interpreter here?" You understood and answered every question that I actually asked you. So
Yeah. No, their English definitely is quite on point.
you know what else is different culture to culture? That the family dynamic.
Oh,
And when I talk about the family dynamic, I mean, there's a number of aspects to that, right? So the approach, the approach to raising kids is a little different.
yeah. Well, so growing up, obviously, we kids just disappeared, figured out how to entertain ourselves, and how to keep each other alive. Because we would take off. Like, I know if you're inside, obviously, kind of just doing whatever. But even outdoors during like nicer weather, we would just be gone. And
I mean,
we got ourselves into a few hairy situations, which we ended up getting ourselves out of, fortunately, too. That's why you roll in groups. But yeah, it's definitely different because you don't have that parental consistent supervision.
listen,
So
I'm gonna tell you something. You know, we were outside, but the parental supervision was there because first off, you knew the rules. Street lights come on, your butt be back in the house. Also,
we have that one too.
if you do something, Miss Johnson see you, Miss Johnson has full authority to whip that butt, just as if that she was your mother or your father. So, you know,
That was probably
you
a
can
little
venture
different.
out. You can venture out, but you better act like you was home because if they, listen, I remember, this is a funny story. I remember, and it just so happened to be my aunt. I don't remember the name of the store, but we were at a store and it was a ways from home. And we were doing something in the store we wasn't supposed to be doing. And then leaving the store, I saw my aunt and she called us over and she says, "What are you guys doing here?" And we was like, "Nothing." Long story short, when we got home, my aunt was over there and she had told my grandmother that we were at the store and we had to say what we were doing at the store. My aunt whipped our butts.
Well, that was consistent across our two cultures.
Whipped our butts. So, I mean, I noticed, and this is not just in Portuguese culture, and I'm not saying it is Portuguese culture, but again, different cultures, their approach to things are different, right? Mm-hmm. So how they raise kids is different.
Yeah.
What's tolerated is different, not just between kids, but I mean, there are certain things that from culture to culture may slide in one culture that might not slide in another culture.
Yeah, I was not allowed to sleep out. Well, family was different, but there was no friend sleepovers.
Yeah, we could listen anything to get us out of the house. Listen, get you out of the house is one less mouth to feed. You go over Jimmy's or whatever, and listen, stay.
No, not for me. It was just not allowed. Luckily, have enough cousins. But
I think even activities from culture to culture, like you would you play the organ or whatever?
Yeah,
I'm sure that you went to Portuguese school and Well, we didn't have black school, so we couldn't go there. I mean, we probably played some drum pails with some sticks. There's some sticks and things like that. And even the concept of actually becoming a family. When I say not even the concept, the approach, right? So in some cultures, there are certain things that you do in a particular order, right? And in other cultures, things come as the wind blows. You know what I mean? So, some cultures is that expectation that, you have to find your mate, get married, you have kids, you buy a house, you do all those things.
Yep.
Other cultures, the order may not go that way, and it may not make a difference.
Right.
So
things happen.
Things happen.
Yeah.
And when those things happen,
I was a black sheep for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of pale for a black sheep, but anyway.
I am.
But even the expectations from a family perspective, depending on the culture, the expectations are a little different.
Oh, yeah. Having a child at a young age was worse than if I had been on drugs.
Yeah, well, I mean...
I think I wouldn't have caught as much slack had I just, decided to do drugs instead.
Well, I think that's because, your parents' expectation was probably you were going to follow that particular order before, you decided to have kids and things of that nature.
And we, which I can't see your background in this, but we were able to drink at a young age.
Well, I mean, it wasn't, I think that
in
It
front of
depends-
family,
It depends on.
not like hiding
Yeah, I mean,
in a shed or something.
it depends on where you were and who you were with.
Mm-hmm.
From a cultural perspective, no, it definitely. But when you're in the hood, I mean, sometimes things happen, and you're not doing it in
Yeah.
front of family. I mean, you may have that one uncle who sliding you a little something on the side, or that one aunt who might give you a little sip on the side, but yeah, definitely not in front of family.
No, I don't even know what age I was, but definitely not of.
You really want to be putting your parents on blast like this?
It's not just, well, honestly, it's
Yeah.
not just it was my family as a whole. I remember my uncle, we'd be at weddings, he would go buy me.
We're not going to say your name.
Yeah. He would buy me Midori and orange juice. I was like, what, 12? Maybe, have my own bottle of wine at the table. Cause I liked the white wine, and the men all drank the red wine.
That explains a lot. So did you go right from the white wine to the tequila because it was white?
No, honestly, tequila came much later in life. I didn't realize why I liked tequila as much. So, and not like vodka. I think I always thought, drinks had to be made with vodka. And then I got to know tequila and I realized, oh, I've been missing out.
Yeah, well, you're missing out on some of that vodka. Anyway, so all right, so now we talk about the differences in cultures. Now, obviously we're from two different cultures.
Yes.
So when these two different cultures come together, right? That's something that you actually have to navigate, because now you have expectations from one side, different expectations from the other side. You have to merge that communication piece. You have to merge those two families.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy to do.
Well, even without the cultural perspective, it's hard to merge those together, two families together, because, you probably want to spend most of the time with your family and vice versa, so
That's not the case, but anyway, go ahead.
I would say the average, and then trying to finagle your way and trying to figure out like what works for you and your family. So the cultural perspective, I think, just even adds more
Well, it
stress
does, because
onto
again,
it.
when you're from a culture where you're so family oriented, right? And the expectation is, okay, well, we have these dinners or lunches on this particular day. The expectation is everyone's going to come. Everyone's going to actually be here. And now you have one side who's been doing all of this, and then you may have someone on the other side, or you may have someone who is, I'm not really big with y'all getting together and doing all this yelling. Gives me a headache. I don't want to be around all that. And so now you got to try to find that common ground. And I think a big part to overcoming that is basically understanding, getting to know and understand not just the individuals, but the culture. Because again, I think the individuals are the way they are because of the culture that they've been a part of for all their lives. And then once you can start looking at it from that perspective, it might make some of that stuff easier.
But you're right. It can still be overwhelming, like to the point if you're coming from a small family, right, where, a family get together is maybe 6 people, to then your partner is a much larger family, and every family get together is 40 people. It can be definitely overwhelming. I must agree, but I think understanding each other as partners too, like, hey, I can only tolerate those 40 people for a couple hours. At that point, it's just too loud.
That's why you drive separate cars. The other part about that too is compromise. And when I say compromise, I mean compromise on a number of things, right? So again, I was talking about the food, the spread, and the spread used to always be the same. And then your parents actually started changing a little bit of stuff. They started making the quails, which I didn't have a problem eating. And then the French fries. I don't think there was anything else. I think it was just pretty much the quails and I know, and some rice.
Yeah. Salad.
Yeah, but I was never a
You're
salad
talking
person.
about
They'd
like the
make the salad,
Sunday
but-
lunches.
Yeah, they would make the salad, but I wouldn't eat them salads.
Yeah, well, they tried to find something that obviously you liked, which was a good compromise of theirs.
Yeah, I mean, listen.
Because you don't
I ate-
eat much red meat.
Yeah, nope.
So, obviously, if we're having steak, they're not
I'm out.
gonna
You having steak, I'm out.
expect you to eat it. They try to find something, but yeah, I feel like that's
Then your
why.
dad started making the chicken. He made it on the rocks a couple times.
Yeah.
Fire department had to come tell him to stop cooking on the rocks.
But you're right. Like, there's such a wide breadth of food and different kinds of food that we were expected to eat because, and that I don't know about our cultural differences. I think it's the same, but maybe still other cultural differences is you ate the food that was given to you.
Oh, 100%.
So whatever it is, whether it is rabbit, goat, octopus, squid,
Well, no, yeah,
chicken,
100%.
pork, beef, you're eating it.
It's still a challenge when you have two people from different cultures
Yeah.
coming together, and when they're coming together, they're more likely than not of an adult age, and so
You can't tell them to just eat what's on your plate.
You can't say eat what's just on your plate, and at the same time, if you're having all of these holidays and you have someone coming over, if there's not something for them to eat at the table, I used to say this all the time. I can tell how much somebody likes me based on whether or not there's something for me to eat when I get there.
Mm-hmm.
If there's
That's what
nothing
my
for me
mom-
to eat
yeah.
when I get there, I know where I stand.
Yeah, well,
Take note.
even as kids, that's why my mom started making like lasagna on like Christmas Eve, which you normally don't eat meat. So just so that,
Who's she making a lasagna for?
well, different people,
All right, because I'm not a huge lasagna
No,
fan.
I know you're not, but yeah, because at some point you recognize that there are cultural differences, and not everybody's brought up the same way.
Yeah, and then
So we used to say the lasagna was the American dish.
pawn it off as the American dish. Well, and then the other thing too is one of the ways that you should navigate two different cultures coming together is creating something of your own.
Yeah.
There are pros and cons to everything, and if you can take the good from one side and marry it with the good from the other side and create something that
Yeah.
you both can coexist in, then
A new family tradition.
yes, and that's a win-win because again, you have those two worlds who are coming together, and now you have the opportunity to build something from that.
Yeah. No, agreed. Because it's definitely going to cause a lot of strife in a relationship if one person feels like their culture is better, we'll say, or
Ooh, I think that was shots fired right there.
I'm not trying
Better.
I lack of a better word for better is just, like this is how we've always, like if they're just stuck in their ways, like this is how we've always done it, like this is what's right, not recognizing other people's cultural differences, that's going to cause a huge stress on a relationship if one partner feels like they have to somehow conform to the other. So I think to your point, if you can blend the two together and create a new tradition of your own, it's probably where it's going to make everybody a lot happier.
Yeah, and you know what the real benefit of that creation of a separate culture or something that you can actually share together is if and when you have children and they have something to have a sense of being from, right? Because what you don't want is you don't want to send kids mixed signals.
Right.
And if you have, this is how we do this on this side. Well, this is how we do this on one side. And now you have a kid in the middle and they have to look both ways and choose.
Right.
They may end up doing something completely different on their own. But if you can marry something
Yes.
and create your own, and now those kids can get a sense of identity from that culture that you created, I think that's a beautiful thing.
No, that is great. And that is the ideal situation, right? Because you don't want the kid to have to feel like they have to pick one identity over the other. That is for sure.
That is correct. And so when we talk about these cultural differences and we talk about how, whether it be the way people communicate, whether it's the food they eat, whether it's how they raise children, whether it's they have certain expectations of their kids or, even their parents when they get to a certain point, the bottom line is eventually when two cultures come together, there is going to have to be some compromise that actually has to happen in order for you to navigate those differences. And just remember this, those differences can give you the opportunity to come up with something that is completely new. Take advantage of that opportunity. And until next time, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you soon.
That's it for this week's episode of the Lunch with Sandy podcast. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your feedback and comments on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Lunch with Sandy. And be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to rate and review us. Thanks again for listening to the Lunch with Sandy podcast.